the kind of knowledge and adult growth in kids that is not happening. And it's not because the poor moms are it's mostly single moms down there. It's not because they don't care about their kids. One of the people in this study that we did a lot of interviews with a lot of kids, as I say, and moms all over, and parents all over the country. One of the people in the study that I most admire is a single black mom from Atlanta that we call, her name in the book is Stephanie. And Stephanie I just admire her tremendously. She's pulled herself up by her bootstraps. She came from a very, very impoverished background herself, the mom I'm talking about, in Detroit. She ended up in Atlanta. She's got 4 kids. She's worked so hard all her life and actually been kind of successful economically and used the money from her. I don't mean she's a great success, but I mean she has a decent living, and she's used that money to move her family to slightly less dangerous neighborhoods. And so when we talked with Stephanie about family dinner, she said, honey, we ain't got time for all that how's your day stuff here. Don't think for a second that I'm poking fun at her. She made the right decision. She worked hard so that her kids could be somewhat safer. But in her economic circumstances, she's right. No, none of that, how's your day stuff, and that means her kids are, through no fault of theirs or their moms, set back compared to other kids. On the right-hand side, we see trends in taking part in extracurricular activities like basketball or football or other chorus or band or debate or whatever. And you can see again a gap just like that in taking part in those activities. It's true for every single sort of activity in America. And if you think again, Putnam, stop hyperventilating about high school football. Who cares about that? Actually, you don't know that the data show that taking part in extracurricular activities itself has a strong effect on your lifetime income and well-being. Why? Because we now know that taking part in extracurricular activities helps create soft skills, teamwork, and what my mom used to call stick-to-itiveness. And so these kids who are no longer getting, you can see there that used to be not much of a gap, but now the gap's getting really wide. What that means is these kids have less opportunity to learn soft skills. I played band in high school, and the good taxpayers of Port Clinton paid for my trombone. I was a lousy trombonist, and they paid for 5 years of music lessons, and for the music, and for the conductor, and for the the auditorium. And I played football. I was even worse at football than I was at trombone. And they paid for my spikes and my pads and my helmet and the Friday night lights and the coaches and so on. And in order to say that why that was important, I have to tell you a little bit about high school football. I'm sorry, I know that this is a little bit off target, but I was an offensive lineman. An offensive lineman, the job of an offensive lineman is to throw your body in front of a giant who's racing toward the quarterback. And you have the way that you practice as an offensive lineman is you spend hundreds of hours on the playing field blocking a wooden dummy to try. I don't mean a person, I mean a dummy. And I did that, and I worked really hard, and I was sort of like 5th string, so it meant I got only in the last couple of minutes of the game could I get in, and I would throw my body in front of the giant, and the giant would run around me. Occasionally, I would throw my body, and I would stop the giant. Yes! And I'd wait for the applause. But no, the applause was going for the quarterback who had just completed a touchdown pass. Now I'm joking. I mean, I'm not joking. What was I learning there? I was learning that sometimes to do well, you have to work really, 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 really hard, over and over again. You don't have any immediate benefit. And I was learning that even when you're successful, often somebody else gets the credit. That's what it means to be in a team. And that's an important, powerful lesson. And we know, it turns out, the data show people who have that experience, and I'm not just talking football, I'm talking band or debate or whatever, they will earn a higher lifetime income because employers are willing to pay for those soft skills. Then you ask, well, why does it look like that, Putnam? Some of these graphs, I don't know quite why the graph looks like that, but this case is a case where I know. Does anybody in the room have any idea why there's been this big drop-off in working class kids taking part in extracurricular activities? Pay to play. Pay to play. Across America. Now, The taxpayers of Port Clinton paid for all that for all kids, me and all the other kids in town. But now in Port Clinton, if you want to take part in extracurricular activities, your parents have to come up with $800 per kid per year. So if you got 2 kids in high school, that's $1,600. If your annual income is $200,000, well, $1,600, that's not a big deal. But if your annual income is $16,000, who in their right mind is going to spend 10% of their total annual family income on high school football? Answer, fewer and fewer people. And the reason I focus on this, I'm not, I'm hyperventilating here about high school football, but what I'm trying to say is, we know how this happened. We did this by electing school boards that charged kids, that said you're not going to get this skill building unless your parents have enough money to pay for you to do that. And don't tell me about waivers, because these are adolescents, so they don't want to get, have to go to the principal and say, please, can I have a waiver? It's like a star on their forehead that says, I'm too poor my parents are too poor to be able to afford sports for me. So this is a good example. I know it's just athletics and so on, but this is a good example of what's happened over the last 30 or 40 years in America. These graphs, I know they're going to get boring if I keep going on very much longer, but I want to just show a couple of them. On the left-hand side is trends in church attendance, and I'm not worried. It's not that I'm worried about the fact that working class kids are no longer going to church. I mean, I am worried about it, but not so much for their souls. Maybe I should be worried about their souls. But I'm worried because it used to be that church and religious congregations were one of the few places in life where poor kids could encounter adults, loving adults, outside the immediate family who cared about them, and these poor kids are no longer there. Indeed, the most important generalization you should carry away from this research is that poor kids in America nowadays, compared to those similar kinds of kids 30 or 40 years ago, are alone. And they can't trust anybody. They can't trust their families as much because their families are fractured. They can't trust their neighbors because they're increasingly concentrated in poor neighborhoods. They can't trust their schools because they're increasingly concentrated in low-income schools. They can't trust their coaches because they're not playing athletics or any extracurriculars anymore. They can't trust their church, their pastor, or the Sunday school people because they're not in church or Sunday school. They are alone, and they know it. They are unbelievably, I'm going to use a technical term here, pissed. There's a growing gap in trust, just trusting other people. And these poor kids they're alone. The way to think about this is that all kids do dumb things. Right? Rich kids, poor kids, black kids, white kids, brown kids, your kids, my kids, all kids do dumb things. They drink too much, or they get involved in drugs, or they get to fight with the teacher, or they back the car into the next door neighbor's garage, or whatever. If a kid coming from an affluent home does a dumb thing, instantly airbags inflate to protect the child from the worst consequences of that dumb decision and give them, make it a learning experience. So if my Miriam, God forbid, you get involved in drugs, the first thing I would do is find the best lawyer in town, and the second thing I would do is to find the best rehab facility in town, and I'm not apologizing for that. That's what loving parents and grandparents do. They try to give their kids a second chance by inflating these airbags. But if Mary Sue did exactly the same dumb thing, no airbag. Just a life-altering experience. And that comes from the fact, I'm trying to say this is not just about the dollars, it's about what we've allowed to happen in the lives of rich kids and poor kids in America. So more scissors graphs, high quality daycare, college completion. I just want to close with one final graph, close the data with one final graph, and then I'll wrap up here. The question that the next data, not this, but the next will show you is, what are the odds of a young person in America today finishing college, getting a college degree, depending upon two things: how able they are, how competent, how smart they are, and their parents' income. And here's the chart. Over on the very far right of that graph are kids coming from affluent homes who have high test scores in 8th grade math. So those are smart, rich kids. And of them, 79% think it says 76, I think, 74% will finish college. Smart rich kids, 34% will finish college. Over on the far left, we have low scoring, poor kids, and of them, 3% will finish college. But look at the two middle bars. Okay, over on the third bar from the left, the dark bar on the left-hand side, those are smart, certified smart poor kids. And of them, 29% will finish college. And over on the next graph over, the light bar on the right-hand side, those are dumb, those are challenged rich kids. And of them, 30% will finish college. I mean, this is directly contrary to the idea that how well you do should depend upon you and not what your parents did or didn't do. Directly contrary to that. Now, I'm not so upset about the fact that 30% of kids from affluent homes who are not being cut off for school exactly, that 30% of them are going to get a college degree. If the parents decide they want to spend money on a college education for their kids, that's fine. But I am unbelievably upset about the 29% figure. Those are smart people. Those are smart kids. They're some of the smartest kids in America, but they're not going to get a college degree, not because they're not able, but because of what their parents did or didn't do. That's just wrong. It's morally wrong. That's like Mary Sue, right? It's morally wrong, but it's also unbelievably costly. It's very costly for the rest of us because that's the future workforce of this country. We want those smart people. We need their contributions to our country, but we're not going to get them, not because they don't have the ability, but because what their parents did or didn't do, and that's very costly. The best econometric estimate here is that not investing in poor kids in America over the lifetime of those kids are going to cost the rest of us about $5 trillion. That's trillion with a T, a lot of money. My Miriam is going to be worse off if we don't invest in Mary Sue. This is not like we can either help Mary Sue or Miriam. My Miriam is going to be worse off. She's going to have to pay A, she's going to have to pay more taxes for criminal justice system, and B, much more important, she's going to have to pay much higher health care costs. My Miriam is going to pay higher health bills because of Mary Sue is going to get sick much earlier and much longer because of her health patterns, and most of all because the country as a whole will not have the benefit of those smart poor kids. So this is not just a matter of how of your moral code. I do think it's a matter of your moral code, but it's also a matter of hard business sense. So why did this happen? Well, there are a lot of different reasons. I'm not going to go through all the reasons why it happened, but the core reason that it happened is captured in the fact that when my parents talked about kids in Port Clinton a generation ago, 2 generations ago, they said we got to do things for our kids here in town. We got to, our kids need a swimming pool, and we got to build a swimming pool. We got to invest in a swimming pool. They were not talking about my sister and me, and they were not talking about a swimming pool in the backyard. They were talking about all the kids in town needing a swimming pool. That is, the meaning of the word our kids was all the kids in town. But over the course of the last 25, 30 years, what's happened in America is that the meaning of our kids is shriveled. So when people nowadays talk about our kids, they're talking about, well, our biological kids. And people in Port Clinton talking about Mary Sue say, well, too bad, not my kid, somebody else's kid, let them worry about it. And that's short-sighted. That's shriveling in the sense of we. Now, if you've been listening carefully, and I know you have, this has been a downer. If you're not depressed at this point, you have not been listening. But I want to just end now with just a couple of words to explain why actually I'm optimistic that we can fix this problem. Because America has been here before. America has previously faced exactly the circumstances that we face today. I'm talking about the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, roughly 1900, 1890, 1900. Big gap between rich and poor, that was called the Gilded Age. Big gap between rich and poor. Biggest gap between rich and poor in American history until now. We're back there. Big opportunity gap. High rates of immigration. People were all upset in America about the high rates of these foreign races coming here. That meant Italians and Jews and Irish and so on. Irish people. It was also a period of extremely high political corruption.